I didn't even want to be in Atlanta that weekend. I'd flown in from Raleigh on a last-minute ticket Laura booked the night before. She said her company's regional dinner would be a good opportunity to show face, and that I should see the other half of her world. That phrase stuck with me. The other half. I remember asking her, "How many halves do you have?" She laughed, told me not to be dramatic. We were staying at a Marriott near the conference center. 2 nights, just long enough for her work dinner and a Sunday brunch with one of her old college friends. I figured I'd smile, shake hands, eat dry steak, and head back home. It was never my thing, suits and surface-level charm. But I went. She looked stunning that night. I'll give her that. Forest green dress, low back, long gold earrings, a confidence in her step like she'd already won something. When we got in the Uber, she was tapping away at her phone nonstop. I asked who she was texting, and she said, "Just work drama. You'll see tonight." I remember thinking, why say you'll see? That's not how you describe a text. Anyway, the dinner was at this place called Marseille 14, one of those upscale restaurants where the lighting is so low it feels like you're supposed to whisper. Private room in the back. Long table set for maybe 15 people. Everyone stood up when we walked in. A mix of polite clapping and laughter. Laura kissed someone on the cheek. A guy with slicked back hair, sharp jaw, expensive watch. He stood too close to her when they talked. She introduced me to everyone as Mark, my better half. And they all smiled in that way coworkers do when they don't really care but know they should act like they do. Dinner itself was fine. People talked in circles about brand rollouts and campaign metrics, and I kept hearing the word disruptive like it meant something. I sipped a whiskey sour and focused on the conversations around me. Every so often, someone would lean over to Laura, whisper something that made her laugh too hard, like they were sharing a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. At some point between dessert and coffee, the waiter came over to drop the check. Laura reached for it, of course she did, and as she opened the folder I saw it. A handwritten note, scribbled in sharp, unmistakable ink. "Thanks for yesterday. Hope the night at Dalton Inn was worth the exhaustion. K." I read it once, then again. I felt my entire body tense, like my chest had forgotten how to expand. The table didn't notice. Not yet. I looked up at Laura. She didn't flinch, not even a blink. Instead, she let out this theatrical laugh, loud, casual, perfectly timed, and held the receipt up for show like it was the punchline to some inside joke. "Oh my God," she said, giggling. "Classic Kevin. Always messing with me." "Kevin?" She looked over at the guy with the expensive watch. Slick back. The one who'd greeted her like they shared a secret. He smiled, tight, nervous, and gave a single shrug before looking down at his wine glass. "He leaves dumb notes like this at every dinner," Laura continued, folding the check and sliding it into her clutch. "Last month he sent me a postcard with just a potato drawn on it." A few people chuckled. One woman at the end of the table forced a loud laugh and looked over at me, almost apologetically. Laura leaned back in her chair, tossed her hair over her shoulder, and changed the subject. "So," she said, clapping her hands once, "update on the Michigan rollout. Lisa, you're gonna hate me." And just like that, everyone followed her lead. Conversation pivoted. Momentum returned. I was the only one still staring at the space where that note had been. My hands were clasped on my lap, fists pressing into each other so tight my knuckles had gone pale. She didn't even look at me, not once. She just kept talking, smiling, stealing sips from her wine, like nothing had happened. Like a handwritten thank you from a mystery K, referencing a night at a hotel meant absolutely nothing. Dalton Inn. I didn't know the place, but the name stuck in my head like a splinter. I didn't say anything then. I didn't ask. What was I supposed to do? Confront her in front of her team? Flip the table? Drag Kevin out by his tie? No. I nodded along. I smiled when people made eye contact with me. I laughed when Laura brought up the time she and her team accidentally launched a pre-beta ad campaign a week early. I played the role. But something inside me, something real, cracked open. You know that moment in winter when the sidewalk looks solid, but your foot hits black ice and for one terrifying second, you're just floating? That's what it felt like. I didn't taste the food after that. Didn't touch my second drink. Just listened. Watched how Laura leaned in when Kevin spoke. How his laugh came half a second after hers, like they were syncing their reactions. How she reached across him once to grab a salt shaker even though there was one on our side of the table. How her smile widened just a little more when he touched her wrist by accident. At one point, the woman seated next to me, Jenny, I think, leaned over and said softly, "Laura's always the life of the party, huh?" I nodded, managed a small laugh. She's definitely something. When dinner wrapped up, people started taking photos. Someone handed me a phone to snap a group *T. Laura stood in the middle, Kevin on her right, his arm just behind her back. Not touching, but close. Too close. She glanced at me once, just as I was taking the picture. I don't know what I expected to see in her face. Guilt? Shame? Nothing. She looked like she was exactly where she belonged. After the dinner, back at the hotel, she changed into her silk robe like nothing had happened. Sat on the edge of the bed, removing her earrings, humming a song I didn't recognize. "You were quiet tonight," she said. "Just tired," I replied, untying my shoes. "You always get like that around strangers." I didn't answer. I just nodded, walked into the bathroom, and shut the door behind me. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. Thanks for yesterday. Hope the night at Dalton Inn was worth the exhaustion. Kay. She didn't even blink. I splashed cold water on my face, dried off, and stood there listening to the muffled sound of her brushing her hair outside the door. I didn't accuse her that night. Didn't scream or demand to know who Kay was. Didn't ask why she hadn't stayed at our hotel if she was too tired that night. Didn't bring up how she'd left for drinks with vendors the day before and come back 3 hours later with her lipstick faded and hair pulled into a messy bun that didn't match how it looked when she left. I let it go, or at least I pretended to. But in that moment, in that restaurant, with her laughing off that note like it was a prank, with Kevin sinking low in his seat and everyone else pretending they hadn't read it, something in me turned to stone. And I knew deep down this wasn't the first red flag. It was just the first one I didn't look away from. They say hindsight is 20/20. I think that's wrong. Hindsight is 20/20 if you're honest, if you're brave enough to face what you already knew. I wasn't brave. For years, I talked myself out of what I saw. But after that night in Atlanta, after the check, the note, the non-reaction, I couldn't unsee anything anymore. It was like someone turned the lights on in a room I'd lived in blindfolded. Suddenly, I was replaying everything I used to dismiss. Like the way Laura always flipped her phone screen down when I walked into the room. She said it was out of habit, that the screen light bothered her eyes. I believed her, or pretended I did. But it wasn't just once. It was always, every time, like clockwork. She'd be texting, smile on her face, thumb flying, and the second I opened the door, click, phone down, screen off, conversation over. I remember the first time it happened. We'd been dating 6 months. I walked into the living room while she was on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. When she saw me, she flipped it over, leaned back and said, "Hey babe." I didn't think much of it then. I thought maybe it was a funny meme or something she was embarrassed to show me. But then it became a pattern. And I told myself I was overthinking. Or the business trips. God, the business trips. 3 in a month. And not once did she bring her laptop. When I asked about it, she said, "Everything's on the cloud now, Mark. I can access anything I need from my phone." It sounded plausible, smart even, and she always had an explanation. Client meetings, team strategy, content brainstorming offsite. Once, she left for what she called a 24-hour brand retreat. No agenda, no confirmation email, no nothing, and came back with a sunburn and no receipts. I remember standing in the kitchen as she unpacked, pulling out a bikini she never wore at home and placing it gently into the laundry. I raised an eyebrow. "Beach break?" I asked. She smiled. Spontaneous happy hour turned into a poolside hang. You know how creatives are. Another time, she came back wearing someone else's scarf. I'm not guessing, I know it wasn't hers. She hated wool, always said it made her itch. This one was thick and plaid, smelled faintly like cologne. She tossed it on the couch like it meant nothing. "Whose is that?" I asked. She barely looked up. "Oh, coworker left it in my car. I didn't realize I grabbed it with my stuff. Want it? It's warm." I remember holding it in my hands, stiff, unfamiliar, and thinking this isn't mine and it isn't hers. But I laughed it off. Because what else do you do when your brain doesn't want to face the obvious? I used to offer to come on trips with her. Not in a controlling way, just to spend time. I'd say things like, "Hey, I could take some days off. Tag along. Check out the city while you're in meetings." She never said no outright. But she'd laugh. That condescending kind of laugh people use when they want you to feel small without sounding cruel. "You'd be so bored," she said once. "It's all back-to-back meetings and lukewarm hotel food. Trust me, you'd just get in the way." Get in the way. Those words echoed in my head for weeks after. I told myself she meant I'd be uncomfortable. I tried to hear it as her being considerate, like she didn't want me to waste my time. But after Atlanta, I heard it differently. I heard you'd see too much. And then there was New Year's. That was the moment I think I broke. But I didn't realize it until later. We were at a dinner party with some friends. Small group, cozy, champagne flutes and string lights. Everyone was doing toasts. You know, the kind, hopeful, over the top. "This is gonna be my year" nonsense. Laura stood up near the end. She had a glass of Prosecco in one hand and the other draped casually on the back of my chair. She smiled. "I just want to say," she began, "this year taught me that not everyone fits in the role they're given. And that's okay. But," she raised her glass, "everyone should know their place." She looked right at me when she said it. The room went quiet for a second. Then someone laughed, and a few others followed, thinking it was just her usual sass. But I felt something inside me recoil, like a slap I wasn't allowed to react to. I smiled. I even laughed, because that's what you do when your partner roasts you in public, right? You pretend it's funny. You don't make a scene. But I felt something snap. I reached down, slipped off my wedding ring, and set it next to her glass. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. I walked out without saying a word. No one followed me. No one called. I don't think anyone knew what they just witnessed. I slept in the car that night, cold leather seat, jacket over my chest. I watched the frost bloom across the windshield at dawn and realized I hadn't cried. Not once. It wasn't heartbreak I felt. It was clarity, like finally seeing the fine print on a contract I'd signed 10 years ago. Realizing I'd been gaslit into thinking silence meant stability. That loyalty meant being ignored. That love meant never asking questions. And the thing is, Laura was never cruel. Not exactly. She didn't yell. She didn't throw things. She didn't call me names. No. She was indifferent. She made me feel optional. Like a prop. Like background noise to the life she actually wanted. One with better lighting and better actors. After the New Year's party, I started noticing more. Not just what she did, but how I reacted. I'd freeze up every time her phone lit up. I'd brace myself whenever she said, "I'll be home late." I stopped asking who she was texting, where she was going, who she'd be with, because I already knew. Maybe not names, but I knew the pattern. The rhythm of betrayal. The lazy cover stories. The way she kissed me less and laughed harder at someone else's jokes. Once, I found an earring back on our bathroom sink. Just the backing, not the earring itself. Laura doesn't wear earrings with those kinds of backs. Hers were always those silicone stoppers. I asked about it casually. She glanced at it and said, "No idea. Could have been from my gym bag or something." I nodded, tossed it in the trash. That night, she wore her hair up. Her ears were bare. And yet, I still said nothing. What kept me quiet? Shame? Fear? Pride? Maybe all of it. Maybe I didn't want to be the guy whose wife was stepping out, who knew and still stayed. Maybe I thought if I didn't say it out loud, it wasn't real. But after Atlanta, after that check, it became impossible to pretend. I started going back over everything. The scarf, the late nights, the guarded phone. Her business calls on speaker that suddenly went to Bluetooth the second I entered the room. The shower running before she'd even taken off her shoes. The random hotel key I once found under the passenger seat of her car. A generic one, no logo. She said it was from a shoot. A shoot. She worked in marketing, not film. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to force her into a corner until she admitted what we both knew. But I didn't. Instead, I started making my own plan, because confrontation wasn't going to fix what had already been hollowed out. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a fight. I just wanted truth. And if she wasn't going to hand it to me, I'd find it myself. A week after New Year's, Laura told me she was headed to the gym. Nothing unusual about it. She'd started going to this new upscale fitness center with a sauna and smoothie bar, and instructors named things like Axel and Sienna. She made a point to tell me it helped her focus, that it was me time. I watched her walk out the door in leggings and a loose hoodie, AirPods already in, and I remember thinking, she didn't even bring her water bottle. Once the front door closed, I just stood there in the kitchen. Then I moved. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. It wasn't about catching her in the act. Not exactly. I think I just wanted confirmation that I wasn't crazy. That all the cold silences and casual dismissals were what I feared they were. I went upstairs and opened the drawer under our bed. It had become a graveyard for old tech. Chargers we no longer used, wires from devices we no longer owned, and one white tablet Laura stopped using around a year ago. I picked it up. It was light, dusty. She hadn't touched it in months. I pressed the power button. To my surprise, it turned on. The battery was still alive. So was the Wi-Fi connection. The lock screen lit up. For digits. I stared at it for a moment, then typed in her old ATM PIN. It opened. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe emails. Maybe half-written journal entries. Maybe nothing. But the moment I tapped into the gallery, I felt my stomach drop. It had been synced. Hundreds of photos. Most were normal *TS, selfies, outfit try-ons. But then I scrolled down to a folder marked trips. The thumbnails alone made my heart start racing. There were photos from hotel rooms I didn't recognize. Mirror selfies. A champagne bottle on a balcony. A hand holding her waist, not mine. And then there was the video. It wasn't hidden. No password. No encryption. Just sitting there in plain sight. I didn't want to press play, but my thumb did it anyway. It was her sitting on someone's lap, in a hotel bathrobe. Her hair was damp. She had one arm around the neck of the same guy from the restaurant, the one with the expensive watch and the quiet guilt in his eyes. She looked at the camera, laughing, whispering something I couldn't make out. Then she leaned in and kissed his neck. Her voice, clear now, came through the speaker, soft and sharp like a knife. Can you believe he still thinks I'm his wife? I paused the video. Silence. It was like the air in the room turned solid. My heartbeat was the only thing I could hear. Steady, cold, deliberate. I didn't scream, didn't throw the tablet, didn't punch the wall. Instead, I took a *T. Then another, and another. Frame by frame, I collected proof. Then I found the printer. It was tucked in the corner of my office, dusty, half-forgotten. Like so many things in our life had become. I connected it via Bluetooth. Printed a single still. Her on his lap, laughing, robe slipping off one shoulder. I slipped it into a plain envelope. No note, no message, just the image. Then I walked into our bedroom. Our bed still perfectly made. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, layered with something newer, sharper. I placed the envelope on her pillow. After that, I opened the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. I didn't take much. A few changes of clothes. My laptop. The documents I needed. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand. Locked the front door behind me. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't call a friend. I didn't post a status or write a note. I just left. Checked into a motel 2 towns over under a different name. Paid in cash. I didn't want a paper trail. Not because I was hiding from her, but because I didn't want her to follow. I didn't want her to feel entitled to an explanation I no longer owed. The motel room was bare. Stale air. Flickering light above the bathroom mirror. But it felt more like home than the house I'd shared with her. I lay on the bed that night staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the ice machine outside and the occasional thud of footsteps from the room above me. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But all I felt was stillness, like something in me had shut off, or maybe just emptied out. I didn't miss her. I missed the person I thought she was, the life I thought we had. I missed the illusion. That was the most painful part, that I'd bought it. Every word, every dismissive laugh, every condescending explanation. I saw the signs. I had all the puzzle pieces in front of me for years, but I kept pretending the picture would change if I just gave it more time. Turns out, some puzzles are just broken from the start. The next morning, I called my job and said I'd be working remotely for the next few weeks. No one asked questions. I think they heard it in my voice. I spent the day shutting things down. Email accounts, joint streaming services, subscriptions. I reset all my passwords, logged out of everything on our shared devices. I blocked her on social media, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to give her a front row seat to the fallout she caused. I found a lawyer that week. Quiet office. Nice guy. Balding. With soft eyes and a firm handshake. He asked me if I wanted to confront her. I said no. What would be the point? The picture was clear now. The proof undeniable. I wasn't interested in hearing her version of the story. I already knew what it would sound like. It wasn't serious. I didn't mean for it to happen. You were distant. None of that mattered. What mattered was the video. The words. Can you believe he still thinks I'm his wife? She laughed when she said it. Like it was a joke. Like I was the punchline. That laughter haunted me more than the image. It made me realize how long I'd been living as a shadow in my own marriage. How long I'd been investing in someone who didn't even see me as real. People always say affairs are about desire, about passion, but sometimes they're about power, about control, about making someone feel invisible just to prove you can. After I moved into the motel, I didn't tell anyone where I was for almost 10 days. Not my parents, not my brother, not my friends. I needed space. I needed to remember who I was before I became her husband. The guy who used to build things with his hands. Who read nonfiction on Saturday mornings and loved slow jazz at night. The guy who used to matter in his own narrative. I journaled. I walked. I ate alone and let silence keep me company. And slowly, I started to feel human again. She sent one text on day 3. Can we talk? I left it unread. She sent another 3 days later. I don't know where you are. I'm scared. No, I thought. You're not scared. You're exposed. And exposure is not the same as danger. Then came the email. I made a mistake. A stupid, impulsive mistake. But it didn't mean anything. I still love you. It didn't mean anything. Funny, how often people use that phrase to describe the very things that blow lives apart. I deleted it without replying. Because the thing is, I didn't need closure. I already had it. I had it in pixels and audio and that cruel little laugh. All that was left was the cleanup. And a decision. I could either let this break me or I could build something new from the rubble. The weirdest part? She bloomed. Or at least that's what it looked like. While I was living in a motel outside Nashville under a fake name, brushing my teeth with generic toothpaste and drinking bad coffee from a paper cup, Laura was thriving. Publicly, at least. She pivoted fast. Faster than I thought anyone could after detonating their own life. Her first move? TikTok. I still remember the exact username. Not that I looked it up myself. Someone forwarded me a link a few weeks later. A mutual friend who had no idea what had happened. Just said, "Hey, isn't this your wife?" Her profile picture was a black and white close-up of her face. Chin tilted. Smirking like she knew a secret. The account name? At Lifey After Toxic. Her bio read, marketing exec, peace seeker, former people pleaser. Currently, thriving. Round pushpin Atlanta briefcase brand strategy studio microphone healing one story at a time. I didn't click the link at first. Just closed the message and stared out the motel window at the parking lot. A red SUV with a cracked taillight had been parked in the same spot for 4 days. I liked that. Its consistency. Its lack of ambition. But curiosity is a disease. That night, I pulled up the video. The first one was a shaky clip of her sitting on our old living room floor. Same rug, same couch I picked out, same succulents she never watered. Holding a glass of wine and staring into the camera like it had just betrayed her. The caption read, "Leaving someone you once loved is a quiet kind of courage." She spoke softly, like a poet rehearsing grief. Said things like, "I used to wake up every morning wondering if I was too much or not enough. But now I just wake up." Dramatic pause. "And that's enough." I almost laughed. But it wasn't funny. Not really. Because people ate it up. Comments poured in. "You're so strong. Sending love to hearts. This hit harder than it should. Ugh. Who hurt you? You deserve the world." Within days, she had 10,000 followers. Then 30,000. Then brands started showing up in her tags. Fitness teas. Skincare serums. Candle companies with slogans like "Burn the past, light the future." A few weeks later, she did a sponsored post in a cashmere hoodie. No makeup, hair tied back, fake vulnerability dialed to 11. She sat on the floor again and said, "When you finally leave a man who made you feel invisible, you start to remember your power." I watched that one twice, not because I was stunned, because I wasn't. I knew her gift. The same one I'd once fallen in love with was narrative. Storytelling. Controlling perception. She didn't need facts. She needed feelings. And she knew exactly how to trigger them. I just didn't realize I'd become her content. The next day, she posted a video titled, "The Day I Chose Myself." She didn't mention me by name. Of course not. That would have made her vulnerable to legal trouble. But she said enough. Some men confuse silence with loyalty. Some men think presence equals partnership. But showing up isn't love. It's just attendance. That line stuck with me, because she was right, showing up isn't love. But she hadn't shown up in over a year. I'd been the one sitting alone at the dinner table, reheating leftovers she said she was too tired to eat. I'd been the one offering to join her on trips she said I'd get in the way of. I'd been the one trying to plan weekend getaways while she texted other people from the bathroom floor. She didn't want presence. She wanted absence she could narrate. By the end of the month, she was verified. Blue check. Bio updated. New hedge *TS. Interviews. The one that broke me, not out of pain but out of something harder to define, came from a digital wellness blog. They asked her, "How did you find the strength to leave your marriage?" She smiled into the camera and said, "My ex? He was like bad Wi-Fi kind of there but never worked." That's when I stopped watching. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even sadness. It was like someone had taken the shape of my identity and carved it into a cautionary meme. I became a metaphor, a lesson in what not to be, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She turned my silence into her currency. And I'll be honest, for a while it worked. She got invited to speak on panels about navigating toxic relationships. She posted clips with titles like, "How to Know You're Not the Problem," and "Why We Stay Too Long." She cried on camera once. Just once. That video hit 1 million views. In it, she said, "It took me years to realize that loyalty isn't love. It's just a habit." And people believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was articulate, beautiful, poised. She knew how to build a brand, and she built one out of our ruins. Meanwhile, I disappeared. But not in the way she thought. My disappearance wasn't surrender. It was ignition. I used to work in back-end systems for nonprofits. Quiet work. Data structures, UX optimizations, stuff that never made headlines but made people's lives smoother. And during those quiet motel nights, I started sketching again. Not drawings. Plans. A digital support system, not a blog, not a podcast, but a framework. A tool set for people who'd been erased by louder narratives. People who had stories but no audience. People who didn't want to go viral. They just wanted to go forward. I called it Still Line. No tagline. No press. Just a name and a promise I made to myself. To build something no one could turn into content. I didn't want followers. I wanted structure. A month into development, I got a letter. An actual letter. Handwritten. It was from Harold Blake, Laura's former boss. I hadn't spoken to him in years. I figured he'd taken her side like everyone else. But the letter surprised me. Mark, you don't know me well and I don't expect a reply. But I saw something I should have stopped. A night you weren't invited to, and shouldn't have been left out of. I've carried that moment too long. I watched a story be rewritten in front of me. I said nothing. I regret that. If you're building something, I want in. HB. We never mentioned Laura. Not once. I didn't want to. Instead, we worked. 2 calls a week. Then 3. Then funding. Then connections. Then a private Slack group with 15 names. All people who had been dismissed, erased, edited out of their own lives. No one posted selfies. No one gave TED Talks. They just built. We created anonymous legal resources, exit strategy templates, peer-to-peer mentorship channels. No spotlights, no blue checks, just tools. And slowly, Still Line grew. Not with noise, but with momentum. And the whole time I stayed off-grid. No updates, no counter-narrative. Because I didn't need to defend myself against the story Laura was telling. I just needed to tell my own. And I didn't need an audience for that. Just purpose. Still Line was never meant to be seen. Not in the traditional sense. There was no press launch, no LinkedIn announcement, no carousel posts or morning show interviews. It lived in shadows by design, a counter to the spotlight, not a rival to it. We weren't trying to trend. We were trying to last. At first, it was just a handful of people. The quietly broken, the resilient ones who'd been told to get over it and smile more. We didn't traffic in revenge. We built infrastructure. Anonymous legal advice, data-scrubbed case studies, recovery frameworks that focused more on who you wanted to be than who hurt you. We weren't loud, but we were real. And then came the letter. A white envelope, no return address. Inside was thick paper, the kind you get from legacy law firms or old-world banks. 1 page, signed by hand. The name at the bottom made my breath catch in my throat. Harold Blake. I hadn't heard his name in years. Laura used to call him HB. Said he was one of those old-guard marketing tycoons who believed in 3 martini lunches and handshakes over contracts. He'd been the CEO of her previous firm, back when we were still in that honeymoon glow. I'd only met him twice, both times at formal events. Firm handshake, cold eyes. The kind of man who didn't say anything extra. I thought he barely remembered me, but the letter said otherwise. Mark, I know this is unexpected. I won't pretend I've earned the right to write you, but I witnessed something a few years ago, something you weren't meant to see. There was a party. Laura was there, and so was I. I saw enough to know the truth. And I said nothing. That silence has sat heavy with me. I followed what you're building. Quietly, carefully. Still Line isn't just smart. It's necessary. If you're open to it, I'd like to invest. No press. No partnerships. Just support. Not because you need it, but because some debts can't be paid with apologies. Harold Blake. I read it 3 times before I moved. There was no bitterness in his words. No agenda. Just the truth, one that came too late to undo anything, but just in time to mean something. I didn't know what he'd seen at that party. Maybe it was Laura and Kevin. Maybe it was just the tone, the body language, the same things I'd been decoding for years. But what mattered more was this. Someone else had noticed. And it wasn't just me. I called him that night. Not to confront. To ask one question. Why now? He paused. Then said, because I'm old enough to know how regret works. And young enough to do something about it. We talked for 90 minutes. Barely mentioned Laura. We talked about power and shame and the difference between being ignored and being erased. I told him what Still Line was becoming, what we were experimenting with, the mentorship pairing system, the silent grant pool, the post-divorce asset recovery tracker. He didn't ask for control. He didn't ask for a title. He just said, what do you need? And that was how it started. With one letter from someone I never expected. And maybe that's the strangest part of healing. It doesn't always come from the people you want it to. Sometimes it arrives through unlikely doors. A month later, Harold wired the first round of funding into a ghost account we used for internal ops. No one else knew. No press, no headlines. He even wrote "consulting retainer" in the memo, in case anyone ever looked too closely. He showed up to a few calls under an alias. Quiet, efficient, asked good questions, offered better answers. And over time, the network grew. Our anonymous Slack server went from 15 to 30, then 50, then 100. People started sharing stories, not in confession, but in construction. Instead of just saying, "Here's how I was hurt," they said, "Here's what I rebuilt." A single mom in Idaho used Stillline to create a grant pipeline for women leaving financially abusive marriages. A high school teacher in upstate New York started a mentorship circle for men navigating post-divorce depression. A trans woman in Oregon rewrote her entire legal identity with the help of someone she met in our tax strategy thread. We became more than a platform. We became a blueprint. And through it all, I remained invisible. No photos, no names, just initials and timestamps. Laura, meanwhile, was everywhere. Her follower count passed 1 million. She launched a merch line, hoodies that said "Choose Yourself," and mugs that read "Silence is Strength." Ironic, considering who she borrowed that last one from. She landed a book deal. Working title, "Unavailable Men and the Women Who Saved Themselves." In an early draft that leaked, forwarded to me anonymously, she described her ex-husband, me, as a man so emotionally beige that living with him felt like waiting in line at the DMV. She wasn't subtle, and she didn't have to be, because her audience wasn't looking for facts. They were looking for a villain. And I was an easy one. Faceless, silent, non-confrontational. But here's what she didn't know. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is sometimes scaffolding. You can build inside it. And we did. Stillline launched its first private fund just 6 months after Harold's letter. We called it the Quiet Room. No press, no photos, just referrals. You didn't find it unless someone showed it to you. We didn't offer followers. We offered frameworks. People started sending handwritten letters again. Not fan mail. Gratitude. Because of you, I finally walked out the door. Stillline helped me recover my own voice. No one believed me. You did. Those letters meant more than anything I could have said online. I kept them in a box, lined with the same red velvet that once held our wedding rings. And when the occasional bitterness crept in, and it did late at night when the world got quiet and the ache got loud, I'd pull out one letter at random, read it slowly, and remind myself, she was loud, but I was true. And that's the thing no algorithm can fake. Eventually, Harold and I started hosting private gatherings. Invite only, anonymized, no phones. We met in rented community halls and church basements, and once even in the back of a closed-down bookstore. We'd talk, listen, workshop. People would walk in with shaking hands, not sure why they'd come. They'd leave standing taller. Not cured, not whole, but in motion. That's all Stillline ever promised. We don't fix you. We don't sell closure. We just help you build forward. And that's what Harold gave me, too. Not an apology. Not redemption. Just partnership. He called one day and said, "This work won't go viral, but it'll last." And I think he's right. Because while Laura was collecting clout and clicks, I was collecting quiet wins. A father who got custody back. A woman who opened her first business. A student who stood up to a professor and finally got heard. I stopped keeping score after a while. Not because I didn't care, but because the scoreboard never mattered. You don't measure healing in likes. You measure it in stability. And slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, I started feeling like a person again. Not a victim. Not a meme. Not a metaphor. Just a man with calloused hands, tired eyes, and something new in his chest. Hope. Not the loud kind. The kind that hums in the background while you build. 2 years in, her empire cracked. It started slow. A few investors pulled out, citing brand misalignment. Then someone on X posted a screenshot *T of her Dalton in video with the caption, Guess who funds the people she tried to bury? It exploded. Brands dropped her. Followers turned. She posted a tearful apology in a hoodie, saying, "I just wanted to be myself." No one bought it. The top comment read, "You're not sorry. You're just alone." 6 months later, she saw the billboard walking home. Black background, white text, still line. "We don't speak. We build." A QR code in the corner. She scanned it. A video played, me half in shadow, voice steady. "Revenge is an admission of weakness. We just moved on." She stood frozen on the sidewalk. Her name faded from headlines. Her fame replaced by absence. And me? I wasn't her ex. I was her echo, the kind that never quite goes away.